At Nutramedica, we want to give you the tools that you need to bring your best game every day in, day out for your patients. And to do that, you must be diligent about your own self-care. So we thought it would be a good idea to ask practitioners across the country what they're doing to stay healthy, stay focused, and stay working at their prime. Today, we're talking to Dr. Jonathan Prousky, a psychotherapist, an author, and an educator. He's also a chief naturopathic medical officer and a professor. Welcome, Dr. Prousky. How are you feeling today?
Feeling pretty good, and thank you for asking. I'm really pleased to be here.
Lovely. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about your practice?
So for the last 20 plus years, my practice has heavily focused on mental health.
Right.
And it's just an area that I'm deeply passionate about. I like the advocacy work that's involved because I really try to empower my patients to take good care of themselves. And I like the idea that I get to know these people because we generally have very good and stable relationships together that last more than one or two visits. So I really get to know my patients. So I see, the whole gamut of mental health issues, whether that's anxiety, depression, or both, which usually is the case, or
Yeah.
even more significant issues like psychotic disorders, schizophrenia, for example, or even bipolar spectrum disorder.
Right.
And then I've seen some more peculiar ones like conversion disorder or somatoform disorder. So sometimes I'll see mental health issues that aren't typical as well, but generally I'll see the ones that I mentioned like anxiety, depression, and then schizophrenia, and then bipolar.
Well, speaking of anxiety and depression, it's been quite a year for most of us. We're at home a lot more. The stress is rising. What are you seeing in your patients that's different this year than perhaps in other years?
It's been devastating, and my heart just goes out to my patients. I just have so much empathy for them because many of the patients to begin with were rather socially disconnected. They didn't live a very integrated life.
Right.
And for them, this has just exacerbated that issue, right? So for many of them, they're feeling even more separate from the world. They're feeling more alone and isolated and more despairing. So I've seen just the same issues, but I would say an exacerbation or an intensification of the very things that humanity has always suffered from, whether we talk about anxiety, depression, or other things. And people have definitely been crushed by this experience because they just have literally nothing to do, and they don't really have the kind of regular or regimented organized life, or at least somewhat of an organized life like they had before. So it's
Right.
just made everything that much more challenging for most of the people that I work with.
And that brings me to you because your patients are showing up every day, and you use the word crushed. I know that you're taking a lot of that on. I mean, the healing journey on the part of the healer is one where you do take some of that on in spite of your best efforts to stay somewhat objective. So let me ask you this, how are you coping with this?
I think I'm coping overall pretty well, and I think it's because I have the benefit of regular employment, a
Right.
fairly good and stable practice, and then a very stable home life. So all of those things have given me a sense of comfort and support, which I
Right.
think has been incredibly helpful during this, I would say, bizarre time. I mean, it's like we're living in a science fiction movie. So
Yeah.
for me, having those elements in place have been incredible grounding and incredibly helpful. But I
Yeah.
also want to comment on something you said about how do I sort of stay normal amidst the difficulties that my patients have. Well, I think it's important for people to realize that when I see a patient, I'm committed to them. But when the visit is over, I recommit myself to my complicated life. And I always tell my interns that when they're with their patients, be involved, be present, be focused. And when the visit's over, the patient has to do their own work. It's up to them to live their life because you will have your own complicated life to go back to. So that's sort of how I separate myself, even though I've dealt with very difficult, very emotional, and sometimes devastatingly emotional things with my patients.
Mhm.
I'm still, for the most part, able to go back to my life and recommit and focus on it because it has so many complexities anyways, and it demands my attention. So if I brought home all of what my patients bring to me in the encounter that I have with them, I wouldn't be able to, I would say, function in my regular life. So I have to have that separation. I have to recommit every time I'm done every day. And then I have to put the energy back into my life where it's needed. That's a very important thing to do.
Yeah. You know, you brought up something that that struck a nerve, which was this idea of routine as being sort of a foundational piece for mental health. You know, you said I have regular employment, I have a stable home life, and it's funny because you know in other times we tend to complain about routine. Oh, it's the same, you know. Same thing, different day, it's the same old routine. And yet, when we take that routine away, we suddenly find ourselves adrift from our moorings sometimes.
Yeah, it's like a ship that's lost at sea.
Yeah,
Even though people don't like the humdrum of everyday life, they don't like the predictability. In fact,
yeah,
it's the very humdrumness or predictability that grounds us. We need to be safe by knowing what's in front of us, in a sense. Even though we can't read our future, even though we don't know what tomorrow brings, if we live in a predictable way with a fairly, I would say, expected type of routine, then that is grounding. That does provide us with security, and that is good for our mental
yeah.
health.
I'm going to throw you a curveball right now because I know that you have an interest and an expertise in circadian rhythms. And I'm wondering if, could you comment on, you know, how we can align the routine of our day-to-day life with the age-old circadian rhythms that governs our biological and even mental processes, and what that could mean for us?
Yeah, and that, I mean, it's a complicated answer, but I'll try to simplify it. So, as everybody knows, we have light and darkness during a 24-hour period.
Right.
And what's pretty phenomenal is the moment we get up in the morning, there's a whole litany of things that happen based on the light and darkness that gets us essentially ready for the day, but also ready to eventually get tired later on. So in the morning, typically we have a cortisol level that's high. If you're a male patient, you have testosterone levels that are high. And if you're a human being in general, you're going to have this output of something called adenosine, which is a chemical that drives sleep pressure. And the moment you get up in the morning, all of these three things happen where you have this sort of burst of hormones which are necessary to mobilize us. And then you have this production of something called adenosine that gets produced over the 24-hour cycle, but gets high enough to the point where we get very, very tired later on. And so as it gets darker outside, our cortisol level gets smaller or more diminished. Our adenosine level picks up, our melatonin level comes up, our testosterone level would naturally be less, typically, although things can change that in an environmental sense. And then let's say by around 9 to 12 p.m., 9 to 11, say 59 p.m., and then 12 a.m., we should be getting extremely tired where all of these typical hormones are altered in such a way that we're very, very tired. So our adenosine level would be very, very high. Our melatonin level production would be where it needs to be high. And then our cortisol level should be lower and our testosterone level should be more moderated, let's say, if we're talking about male patients or male individuals. And that should drive us into sleep. And that's sort of a sense of those circadian rhythms. But you know, we were talking about what happens during this bizarre time that we're in. I have many patients that regrettably their rhythms are totally reversed. So they're up when people are sleeping and they're sleeping when everybody's up, and their mood is totally impacted. So they're
Yeah.
all over the place and their natural rhythms have been completely, I would say, impacted because they don't have regularity in their life. There's nothing that's really getting them up. So they're unfortunately not listening to their body, and they're overriding all of these natural rhythms by doing things in a sense in the reverse. So
Yeah.
this whole situation, I think, is disrupting people's natural circadian rhythms.
Right. So let's move on. Thank you for that. What are you doing to look after yourself? Now you've spoken. You have a stable, you know, nice stable home life, and you've got a stable professional situation. What else are you doing to look after yourself?
Well, I just want to say one thing. So it does take one to know one. So I don't, I'm not sort of naive to mental health issues. I myself have had quite a bit of a struggle beginning, I would say, my early teenage years, like 13 years of age, up until maybe my late 20s, where social anxiety was just profound.
Hmm.
So I certainly feel I've overcome that, and the skills that I learned to overcome my own social anxieties and to bolster my own resiliency, let's say, have stayed with me for now several decades. And
Right.
I've committed myself to a fairly good routine over the last several decades, which I think has spared me, in a sense, from what's happening in the world right now. In a sense, it's given me some protection. So I'll outline what I do on a daily basis that I think gives me that ability and keeps me above water. But by no means am I Superman. No one is. And by no means I still can succumb to profound anxiety at times that I have to work
Mhm.
through. And I
Right.
still have my own struggles. So none of this keeps me, in a sense, perfect. It just keeps me going forward, which is what I want. I always want to aim forward if I can, even if I'm aiming clumsily, let's
So
say.
progress rather than perfection.
Exactly. And I don't believe in the perfection model. Listen, I'm as human and as fallible as everybody else. I have
Right.
all sorts of my own issues, but what I do daily is important. So number one is I basically wake up around the same time every day. So I'm up between, I would say, 5:30 and 6:30 every day. And that's important for me to get up at the same time. I literally make my bed. So I do like to do that. It sort of sets my day in order to do something that's complete right from the get-go.
The first thing you've accomplished of the day. I think that's yeah.
Yeah, and it
Yeah.
kind of sets me in order, and I like that. And then
Yeah.
what I typically do is I have a cup of coffee. It's just basically with cream, and I don't eat anything until around 12 noon. So I do try to minimize a burden of calories from the moment I get up, obviously until noon. So I'm really not eating from around 6 p.m. until the next day, and I actually feel better mentally. I think by limiting my the amount of meals in a day and my caloric load, it does make me feel psychologically better. So that's something that I do. And then I try to eat rather well. So I do try to eat a varied diet. I don't avoid meat, but I do eat tons of fruits and vegetables. So I eat just a couple of apples every day. I eat tons of carrots every day. I have a salad every day. So I'm probably at least getting, I would say, 7 to 9 servings of at least fruits and vegetables daily. And then I eat whatever else I want. I don't eat a lot of processed foods. I don't eat a lot of chips, although I love those things and I try to minimize them as best as I can.
I think we all do.
Absolutely. And then I exercise. I absolutely commit myself to at least, I would say, 30 to 60 minutes of exercise daily. It can involve nature walks. I love being in nature. We do that as a family a lot, which is a wonderful way to connect with each other, to talk, to feel close, and just to be outside to get the fresh air. But I also will exercise down in my basement with an elliptical machine, and I'll make sure I'm pouring with sweat. And that's vitally important with me to have some kind of release. And I think exercise for me does more for my mind than my body. I just feel more grounded from doing it. I also think relationships are so important to me. The closest people in my life are my family, and I dearly love them. And to me, it's just having that wolf pack, right? Having this little family of mine that supports me and holds me up when I'm not feeling well, when I'm not feeling grounded, has been vitally important. So my wife, my daughters, and even my dog, believe it or not, my dog can just come over and sit on my lap, and that can provide me sometimes with the psychological grounding that I may not be able to do at that moment for myself. So just having those social connections is important. And then doing some kind of service for other people. So I'm
So
lucky that I'm
important.
a doctor, right? I'm lucky that I can help people because that also is a little bit selfish.
Right.
In helping people, I'm helping myself. And then
Right.
I have a mother who has dementia and she's very unwell, visiting her, making sure that I'm still seeing her, that I'm still part of her life, that I'm still connecting with her also gives me a sense of that I'm doing the responsible thing by committing to my mother, but I'm also connecting with her, even if she won't remember seeing me that day when I see her. So basically, I'm committing to the people in my life that keep me grounded, and I'm getting a lot back. I'm doing service for people, which I'm grateful to have, and that helps me. And then I exercise a lot. And then the other component is I take a ton of supplements. And I don't think of that as wasteful at all. In fact, it's necessary. It's either supplements for me or I'd be on medications, no doubt. So I take a lot of psychotropic supplements. I take ashwagandha in high doses. I take fish oil in high doses. I take St. John's wort in high doses. I sometimes take passion flower, lavender if sleep becomes an issue. I take melatonin as well. I take a multivitamin every day. I take extra vitamin D3. I take B complex vitamins. I take a little bit of vitamin E, though I know Dr. Phil would think that's not good, but I don't agree with him. I take a little bit of vitamin E every day. I also, what else do I do? Oh my gosh, there's probably more than I'm
Let me
missing,
ask you
but
this. So you
supplementation is important for me as well.
So you've outlined really an exemplary lifestyle. Let's face it. The diet, the exercise, the connection with the family, and then doing service and visiting your mom and so on. So just to finish this up, my last question for you is, what do you do for fun?
Yeah, I mean, the good news is I find being with my family fun, although they can totally get on my nerves at times, and I'm sure I'm
right.
getting on their nerves at times, but that is fun. I'm a huge hockey fan. So one of my greatest hobbies is this unbelievable commitment I have to the Toronto Maple Leafs. So it's been a very one-sided commitment. I'm giving
Yeah.
them all of myself, and they're not giving me enough in return. They're giving me a lot of, I would say, ups and downs, but
No wonder you're
they haven't
taking
won the
passion
cup
flower.
in decades here. So
No wonder
watching
you
hockey is a real thing for me. Go ahead.
right.
No, I was just going to say, no wonder you're fighting depression if you're supporting the Toronto Maple Leafs. What about music? And culture? Do you have that in your life? Is that an important part of it?
Yeah, so I should have said I'm a huge reader. I read voraciously, which is a wonderful thing for me to do. It calms me down. Plus music. I can't imagine a life without the Rolling Stones, without U2, without the Beatles, without Earth, Wind and Fire, without just so many of these amazing groups, without the Who, without, Led Zeppelin. I'm not a huge fan of the music of today, and
Right.
I'm blaring and blasting music from all of those artists, and I love it. I love being in my car just blasting the music and singing at the top of my lungs, sometimes even screaming. I love AC/DC, Thunderstruck. I love that song. That's like one of my go-to power songs. So I think music has an incredible ability to move people, to de-stress people, that it's
Yes.
even hard to describe. It's not even describable what music can do for one's biology in a sense.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I really appreciate you taking time today to share your self-care regimen. It's great to get to know you a little better. And Dr. Prousky, we'll see you again on Nutramedica.
Thank you so much. I'm really grateful for you involving me as well. Thank you kindly.
You can see that we do invite North America's leading natural health clinicians to share their insight and their experience on Nutramedica every day. So to get notified about our newest programs, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. And if you enjoyed the program, please let us know. You can like or comment. We always appreciate your feedback. So as always, I invite you to go ahead and click on the links below this video. You will get unlimited access to our entire research library of over 200 white papers, clinical guidelines, all done by leaders in natural health research from around the world. Simply register as a health professional to get your free access. That's it from us here at Nutramedica. Thanks for watching today, and we'll see you next time.